Hello and welcome to this Power Breakfast hosted by the Collective Empowerment Group. My name is Dr. Bobby Manning. I'm blessed to be the president of the Collective Empowerment Group, and we're blessed that you decided to join us for this incredible Power Breakfast with this strong panel of geniuses that's going to help us talk about your powerful voice. The Collective Empowerment Group is an organization of churches and businesses and banks that come together to bring together our collective strength for economic empowerment. For more information about the Collective Empowerment Group, please go to our website, which is www.empowerdmv.org. We have strategic partners. So if you are a local business, whether you're a small business or a large corporation, you can be a strategic partner with the Collective Empowerment Group so that you might bring your collective strength together to empower your community. It brings about several networking opportunities, as well as an opportunity to build your potential client pool into the faith community. If you are a local church, whether you are a leader or a member, if you are a member of a local church, I want you to call your pastor and ask them, are you a member of the Collective Empowerment Group? That membership allows you connection with the business and banking communities, the political community as well, discounts and special incentives with our strategic partners, and informational team building sessions and seminars, and more opportunities like we're doing today to be educated on how you can take advantage of opportunities to empower you personally and economically. Today's conversation is about making sure that we utilize our powerful voice. Every last one of us has a powerful voice, and we want to use that voice to make a change from the protest all the way to the voting booth. I'm so excited to have this incredible panel with me today, and I'm even more excited to introduce them to you. First, we have Ms. Joanne Antoine, who is the Executive Director of Common Cause Maryland. She has a master's of public policy from Monmouth University. She's worked as an organizer, a trainer, a strategist for numerous campaigns, both in the U.S. and overseas, particularly in Haiti. She specializes in money and politics, policy, and voting rights, and she's here to help us to make sure that our ballots are right for this November's election. Ms. Antoine, thank you so much for joining us today. We also have Mr. Thomas Johnson, who is the 2020 Census Project Manager for Prince George's County. Mr. Johnson is the former overseer of the Transforming Neighborhoods Initiative in the county, and he's here to make sure that we know what's going on with this 2020 census. Mr. Johnson, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. And then we have my friend, Pastor Devin Turner. Pastor Devin is the pastor of Revolution Church here in DC. He's also the president of an organization called Justice and Equality, which has led multiple demonstrations here in the DMV area since the murder of George Floyd, and is taking that voice from the demonstration all the way to the table so that real change can be made. And I'm excited to have Pastor Devin with us. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Pastor Devin, I want to start with you because the protest and the demonstration has been the loudest voice, I believe, over the last several months since we said since the murder of George Floyd. You have been very, very active. But if we just rewind the tape of 2020 all the way back to names like Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor, people have been moved to the streets. And I've been so excited to see because you've been at the forefront of a lot of that. You've been on the news and in the newspaper. For like every time I open the newspaper or turn on the television, I saw you on the front lines here locally. Could you begin first by telling us what is this organization that you began, Justice and Equality, and what's the purpose and what has been some of the outcomes of what you've been doing?
Absolutely. So yeah, Justice and Equality started up in June. Before June, I had been doing advocacy work and trying to influence policy to better those that are disenfranchised. And so finally in June, I decided, prayed about it and felt led by God to start justice and equality. So what we do is we help marginalized communities that are disenfranchised to get empowerment. And we do that on the community level and on the legislative level, from influencing policy to lobbying, all the way down to putting families in safe houses that need help, food programs. We're doing a whole lot of God's work. And that's pretty much how we got started. And that's just a little bit about what justice and equality is all about.
Man, that is so excellent. I had the privilege of being a part of a couple of your demonstrations and walking and marching with you in downtown DC. Man, I'm so appreciative of the work that you've been doing. There's one of the demonstrations that you led that was I thought was an incredible idea, and even better with the execution. Could you tell us about the funeral that you had for those who have been murdered by police, and you partnered with several organizations to have this demonstration with, the whole nine, with the hearses, etc. Could you share with us what the vision behind that and what came of that?
Absolutely. A lady named Anika Prather and her brother Dwayne McKinney, he's a pastor as well, in PG County. They approached me and they said, "Hey, we've seen what you've been doing in the streets. We have an idea to do a funeral procession and to honor Black lives." And so as we were talking, I said, "Well, what did you call it? Black Lives Funeral." And so from there, we brought in, there's another brother named Daniel Payne who runs a funeral home. And all four of us came together and made it happen. And we did one of the largest funeral processions from Prince George's County, Maryland, all the way to DC. I think we had about 50 hearses and limos. And we did a march in front of the White House down Black Lives Matter Plaza. And the call to action from that was a piece of legislation that we were trying to get pushed. We had a petition to refund from the police department. I know that some organizations want to defund, but if we really understand what defund means, it can mean two different things. Defund can mean taking resources from police departments and putting it to help the community better. And some people mean to abolish policing altogether and defund it completely. So we just chose the language refund. And so Justice and Equality partnered with Anika Prather, Dwayne McKinney, and Daniel Payne, and we came in, had a petition. We got hundreds of signatures about refunding. We asked the city council to take $110 million from the proposed police budget and to put it into very specific programs: mental health support, economic empowerment. We were pushing for them to have crisis responders that are not armed, all types of things that we've seen work in other cities. The models of what we've been doing in the city with the peace walks that I do on Fridays. With peace walks, we do walks in some of the most violent communities in DC, and we help people find jobs, resume building, food programs, mental health support with the DC government. And so with the peace walks and with justice and equality, we modeled this approach from what we saw happen in Boston with the Boston Miracle with Reverend Jeffrey Brown. And they saw the homicide rate drop 79% in Boston in the mid-90s when clergy started working with community organizers on the ground. And then the government was like, "Oh yeah, we do need to put, more police isn't going to stop crime," because police either show up after a killing happens or they cause the killing. They don't deter the gun violence. And so a big part of justice and equality is to help end gun violence. We try to call truces between rivals that have issues they're trying to dispute. So we do a lot of different work on the community level, mentorship, food programs. We wanted to adopt a school, but because of COVID, we're still waiting on that. And then we go into the legislative part where the policies and petitions and pushes. And we got an 8-5 vote in the DC City Council in favor of our petition. But we needed a 9-4 so that the mayor couldn't veto it. And so when it finally went to vote on it at the end of July, our requests were not met. And then we had a large shooting, 21-person mass shooting the next month. in DC. And so that's just a little bit about what we do on the community level, the legislative level, and that Black Lives Funeral is really honoring Black lives that have been lost to police brutality, as well as just Black lives that we've lost to gun violence in general.
Excellent, man. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And you are an exceptional example of how powerful the voice on the streets is, especially when we're united and we are demonstrating on the streets. And of course, I've been there, so I've seen how peaceful, but also how strong these demonstrations have been. Could you tell us how we could get more information about your organization and send us to the website so that we can know how to reach you?
Sure. Our website is justiceandequality.org. So if you go to justiceandequality.org, there's all the information, email, you can sign up, you can donate, you can get more information about what we're doing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Pastor Devin. You are teaching us that there's power, of course, in our demonstration. But there's one other aspect of the power of our voice that I would love for us to talk about with Mr. Thomas Johnson, who's with us today. And it's maybe an unexpected voice that we have, and that is participating in the U.S. Census. Mr. Johnson, thank you so much for joining us today. I want to begin just by asking you to help us understand why it's important for us to participate in the 2020 census.
Wow. Well, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me with these amazing guests. And Devin, I was taking notes, so I will definitely be in contact with you in the future because that's amazing work you're doing. The census, there are three things that we try to save the county. It's safe, it's easy, and it's important.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's safe because, especially with some of the rhetoric that we've been hearing recently, saying that illegal immigrants would get their information shared with our police departments or ICE. That's not true. Their information would not be reported. Also, there's a $250,000 fine for if someone shares information and or 5 years of imprisonment.
Mm.
So that right there lets us know it's safe. We don't have to worry about our information. They're not asking for a social security number. They're not asking for any other private information. It's easy. It literally takes less than 10 minutes, the amount of time it takes to drink a cup of coffee to complete the census. And this is for the first time ever, you can complete your census on your cell phone. You can do it online. I love it. We have a family of 5. It took us 7 minutes to complete our census. And it's important, right? It's important because in 2010, in this county, Prince George's County, we lost $363 million. Now let's break that down a little bit. Over a 10-year period, for each person that doesn't complete their census, we lose $18,250. So that lets us also know in Prince George's County, we did not count 19,900 people. And that math gets us to 363 million. So it's important. It's important. It also deals with our lines, our districting lines. If we want to make sure that our vote is heard, and I'm not going to go into that too much because we have a powerful voice talking about that next. If we want to make sure we're heard, we need to make sure that our census is completed. How many of us have heard about food deserts? Mm-hmm. In communities that aren't getting grocery stores? Well, if they do not have the proper count of folks that are in these communities, then we'll have other nefarious businesses that already know the people are there. They're scouting out the locations, but we're not going to get the Whole Foods. We're not going to get the grocery stores that we need. We're going to get fast food restaurants, liquor stores, and nefarious stores that we don't want in our communities, right? And we also know for education, it's important for education. We need this money for our funding, our teachers. Right now, we are going through COVID-19, right? And this is a serious time. What people don't realize with the vaccine, when there becomes a vaccine, if we don't have an accurate count for people, then we're gonna have a short of vaccines that are distributed to the folks in the community. So do I wanna be one of those that don't receive mine because I did not accurately get counted? I don't think any of us on this call or anybody that's going to be listening to this want to be. because we want to make sure that our families are taken care of. This money not only takes care of us for now, but it will take care of us for 10 years. And one thing that I like to say is that we received the stimulus payment, what was that, earlier this year, financially. Why don't we create our own stimulus and complete the census?
So
Really create change.
So helping us for those of us who are laypersons, just to understand that government funding, federal funding, and the amount of federal funding that we receive in our communities is dependent upon what the data that the census collects, correct?
Absolutely, sir. Absolutely. And that's one of the things that we have to realize. There are grants that are available for our churches. For instance, we're standing up a program now called Stand Up and Deliver. And so we're distributing meals throughout the county with our churches as partners. But if we don't have that funding, then we're not able to distribute these meals to families that need it. And with our partners as our churches.
Absolutely. And so it's so important that we are counted, that every single citizen, and of course, Mr. Johnson specializes in Prince George's County, Maryland, but surely there are people who are enjoying this broadcast from all over the state and all over the country. Wherever you are, it's so important that you participate in the 2020 census, because the funding that comes to your community, that funding that makes sure that food programs come to your community, that funding that makes sure that schools get the funding that they need in your community. This is the way that we make sure that we get that funding. I know you mentioned it briefly, Mr. Johnson, but I want to come back around because there has been some concern about the census, about people completing the census, and they're being concerned once again about immigration, about my criminal record, about things that would maybe prevent someone from completing the census for personal reasons. Could you set our hearts at ease about that once again, to make sure that we understand what the realities are in regards to that?
Absolutely. So just to make everyone comfortable, the census is not asking for any personal information. They don't want to know if you've been in prison or if you're an illegal immigrant or whatever status you are. What we're really looking for is numbers. We want to make sure that we are accurately counted in this county or wherever you are. So throughout the United States, making sure that your area is accurately counted, because there is so much money on the table. There is literally $675 billion, I mean billion, on the table for places. And I was asked the question, Pastor, well, what happens? Does that money go off to a kitty and kind of get saved? I was like, no. What happens is, for the folks that reach their numbers and do well, they get that money distributed to them. Wow. For places that don't, we don't see that money again. It doesn't come back around. Interesting enough, for every person that is missed in DC in the census, they lose $45,000.
Wow.
45. That's serious money.
That is serious money. And so somebody's watching right now, Mr. Johnson, who believes us and is ready to go on and take their census. What do they do? Maybe they already threw away the envelope that came in the mail, but it's not too late. Tell us what to do. We want to go and do the census. Tell us what to do right now.
I love it. So it's easy, right? That's the part I love. You can call the phone number, and I can share it with you all. It is, I believe, 1-800-330-2020, right? That's the English. Then we have a Spanish number and in 18 other different languages. So it's available. Also, if you want to complete it online, you go to www.my2020census.gov in multiple languages. You can pull it up right there and complete it with no problem. It may have a section on there that asks you to put in your code. You don't need that. Right below it, it says if you don't have it, continue, push this, and you can go on. The third way is you can do it by mail. You can write it, right? So if you love snail mail or you just want to send it in, you can do that. It's no problem. Like I said before, you can also do it by phone. So it's as easy, it's fluid on your phone as much as it is on your iPad, tablet, or on your computer device.
So the website, once again, is www.my2020.
2020.
You say it. Don't let me mess it up.
No, you got it. It's www.my2020census.gov.
Perfect. Perfect. Now, you bring up the snail mail, and we're going to talk to Ms. Joanne Antoine about snail mail right now, because we know what's coming up in November, that we have the most unique presidential election in all of our lifetime for so many different reasons, particularly because we're voting in the middle of a global pandemic. And there are so many questions about how we go about casting votes with the 2020 presidential election. And we got Ms. Joanne Antoine, who's going to coach us to make sure that your vote is counted. I want to encourage every person, whether you're a young person who's voting for the first time, or if you voted several times, it's going to look different this year. Ms. Antoine, could you help us out with how we make sure that we do it safely and that we do it securely this election season? First, and my first question is, what about this mail-in ballot situation? We're confused, and we need and we need you to help us, because for the primaries, they came to our house, but it's different now. Talk to us about mail-in ballots and how we make sure that we get our ballots securely.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Dr. Manning, for having me on today. And thank you all for your great points and so forth. COVID-19 obviously has impacted every aspect of our lives. I guess we're in phase 3 now, so we're out and about somewhat in a safe way. But we've been confined to our homes, right? And, right now there's a lot of people who are thinking about how they're going to pay their rent, how they're navigating the unemployment system and so forth. So Common Cause and our partners, have really been making sure that none of the changes that are being made to the election process due to COVID, that they disenfranchise voters. So at the peak of COVID, when Governor Hogan declared a state of emergency, he actually took swift action, right? He was, like us, working to ensure that Marylanders or Maryland voters, that they didn't have to choose between their health and their right to vote. And that's when he decided to instruct the State Board of Elections to mail ballots to every active voter. Now, this is the first time we've ever had an election like that before. Less than 10% of the population votes by mail. And while there were a lot of glitches along the way, we did see an increase in participation, especially in jurisdictions like Baltimore City, where they actually had the highest turnout in the state. Now, we, coming out of the primary, we knew that we needed to have a similar election in the general. Unfortunately, the governor, for reasons that we're not clear on, has chosen not to instruct the state board to mail ballots, which creates an additional hurdle and confuses voters, right? Because you've received your ballot if by mail in the primary. If you lived in Congressional District 7, you also received a ballot in that election as well. So we're working to ensure that everyone knows how to request their ballot. So we've been telling folks there's 3 ways to vote, right? Voting in person is your last option. You go there if you need to. If you need assistance, you need to use a ballot marking device because you've got disabilities and so forth. But if you want to vote by mail, you need to go to elections.maryland.gov and make your request. Your request has to be received by October 20th. Now, the governor has also instructed the state board to mail everyone a request application or a request form. You all should have received it at this point. We're still encouraging people, if you have a state ID, to go online and make the request. It helps to make sure that the processing is quicker for the local boards and so forth. But if you need to use that form, you should request your ballot today. We're telling people, help to flatten the ballot request curve, right? We want to make sure that it's not October 20th that all of these requests are coming in. You should make that request now. It ensures that any concerns any delays in mail, for example, that it gets to the local boards in time for processing, that if there's something wrong with your application, you forgot to sign, something's not clear, that they're able to contact you and follow up really quickly and so forth. So, we're making sure that voters know, again, that they need to make the request, that your ballot is not on the way, and that if you see an envelope with the little purple stripe right now, that's not your ballot. Ballots don't start going out until September 24th. That is your application that needs to be returned right away.
So the instruction for us today from Joanne Antoine is to make sure that we go and get our ballot request, that we request our ballot, whether we do it online or whether we've received in the mail the ballot request form. Perfect. All right. So I put that in, whether online or I send it in through the snail mail, and so that when they send out ballots in September, the end of September, what do I do then?
Okay. So it depends on how you requested your ballot. So if you have requested your ballot, an electronic ballot, you went online, you filled out the form, you said you want it sent to you by email, you have to then download your ballot, print it out, provide your own envelope and so forth, and return it in time. If you've received a ballot, there'll be multiple ways for you to return your ballot or vote your ballot, right? You can go to one of the secure drop boxes that will be made available all throughout your county. We're still waiting for what those locations will be, but there should be more than 30 in most of the larger jurisdictions. They'll be available 24/7. There's surveillance there. The local boards go and pick up ballots 2 to 3 times per day, and so forth. If you are planning on mailing your ballot, let's say you just drop box is too far away, you don't drive, you don't want to, you're quarantined, right? You can't go out and you have to use the Postal Service. Vote early. You want to, as soon as the ballot comes to you, you want to fill it out as soon as possible. If you need information, you can go to places like vote411.org, which has nonpartisan information about ballot questions that are on there, but you want to return it as soon as possible to avoid any possible delays in your ballot getting to the local board offices. But, we're recommending, as soon as it comes, use the Dropbox. That is your best way forward. It is secure. For those that have fears about the Postal Service, that is the recommended route for everyone.
Absolutely. We've heard so much propaganda. We've heard so much back and forth about the Postal Service, how slowly the Postal Service has been operating, how difficult it's been for us to get just regular mail at this time. And so there are many of us who are concerned about the mail-in ballots. And so I appreciate your suggestion. Number one suggestion is to get your ballot early and drop it off at one of your local drop boxes. The most secure way to do it, the most safe way to do it. I appreciate you said it's under surveillance and picked up multiple times a day, so you do not have to worry about your ballot being unsafe. Thank you so much for that. There have been several questions about what might disqualify my ballot. Several citizens are concerned about doing it the wrong way and it being disqualified, whether it's where I sign it or if I sign it, or do I sign the envelope, or do I sign the ballot, or do I not sign the ballot, or do I start electronically and end in person, and there is so much confusion. Could you help us to wade through some of that, Ms. Antoine, so that we make sure that when we do cast our ballot, nobody tosses it out on a technicality?
Yeah, if you have requested your ballot electronically, there is no return envelope for you to sign, right? So you are making sure that you are filling out that ballot using a black pen. You are filling in the bubbles as full as possible, and you'll see the electronic ballot has somewhere for you to sign. You're using your own envelope at that point. You should make sure your information is outside of it if you're placing it in a drop box or if you're mailing it, but you don't need to sign your envelope at that point, right? Because it's not a local local board return envelope, it's your own personal one. But if you are using a Maryland ballot that has been mailed to you, your ballot will unfortunately be rejected if it's not received on time and if it's not signed. So you want to make sure that when you're filling out your ballot, again, the black pen is going to be key there and filling it in completely. Don't use pencil because the local boards have to refill everything, replicate it for you, which you probably want to avoid. You want to make sure that you are sealing the envelope and that you sign it on the outside, in the back. Now, our return envelopes are going to look a bit different than they did in the primary. There were a lot of concerns from voters about their signature. You know, I don't think about my signature, but you know, there are a lot of fears of fraud and you know, and so forth. So they've added a privacy flap. So you'll see that you sign your return envelope, the flap is there. You don't have to worry about a stamp because you're able to, you know, it's prepaid already. You can just drop it off in the mail or drop it via Dropbox. Now back to the electronic ballot, there were some confusions. You know, I think some folks think that when they request it electronically, you can return it that way. You cannot. So remember, the safest election processes are done using paper-based systems, right? There's a reason why we haven't gotten to a point where voters are able to vote by app and so forth, right? We want to limit foreign interference. We want to eliminate any type of interference, to be honest with you, right? So you are printing, signing it, and delivering it to a Dropbox or in the mail. It does not get returned electronically. And if you try and do it that way, unfortunately, it will also be disqualified. I think the other major piece to remember, deadlines are important. So if you want to vote safely, your request has to be received, meaning in the hands of the local board by October 20th. If you want to make sure your vote is counted, again, this is where voting early is important, whether it be by mail or in person, because if your return envelope is not postmarked by the 3rd, it will again be disqualified. So just making sure that you're doing things sooner than later, especially in the environment that we're in today.
Absolutely. All right. So I want to run down these important concepts here because you shared it with us, a lot of important information. Number one, deadlines matter. And so you have to request your ballot on time, get your ballot, and get it back into the election officials' hands on time. Can you give us those dates one more time?
Yes, the request deadline, where it has to be to the local board electronically or by mail, October 20th. And obviously, election day is the deadline for returning. Even if you're using a Dropbox, it's funny, at the primary, I was in Prince George's watching as people were running over. Once it hit 8 o'clock, unless you've got nice security there, legally they will lock the box, so you will not be able to drop in your ballot. So go early, meet that deadline. And I forgot to flag the voter registration deadline, October 13th. Maryland does have same-day registration available, so if someone wasn't registered, they've gotten activated during the peak of GOTV, they can go during all 9 days of in-person voting and register and vote right there as well.
All right. So if you're not registered, register to vote today. If you don't have your ballot request form, get your ballot request form and send it in, preferably electronically, you said, so that you can get your ballot. And then once you have your ballot, now I want to be clear, and we talked off camera about this signature thing, because so many people are concerned about signature. So do we sign the ballot and the envelope?
Mm-hmm. If you have an electronic ballot, you sign the ballot itself. If you have the ballot that was mailed to you, you are signing the return envelope.
Gotcha. So wherever it asks for your signature.
Pretty much. And it's very clear up at the top. The electronic ones come with very detailed instructions because it's being emailed to you and it's a completely different layout, but you're signing the ballot at that point because you're using your own envelope.
Gotcha. All right, that clears up so much, y'all. Thank you all so much for all of your genius. I want to go back around the horn one more time, because what we're talking about, folks, is the powerful voice that every citizen has. And we've been talking about how we can go about using that powerful voice that we have. And so I want to ask each of our panelists, before we say goodbye, if you could just give us 1 minute of why it's so important for us to use our voice and how God has challenged you and encouraged you in using your particular voice to make change in our world. Pastor Devin, how have you used your voice, and what's one thing that you want to leave with us?
Well, what I want to leave with you is that Nehemiah in the Old Testament, he was governor of Judah, and he was also a man of God. So many times I talk to people say, well, you shouldn't be down there protesting. You're a pastor, you preachers and separation of church and state. If you're really a person of faith and you follow the teachings of the Holy Bible, you'll see that God is for justice. God is for equality. And our God is not a racist. He's not a bigot. And when we think about it, I would say that the takeaway to share with people is, if you're really going to walk in the footsteps of Jesus Christ, really think about this just for a moment, that Jesus was a Jew in a very Roman Empire environment, a heavily white supremacy dominated society. His cousin was publicly murdered by white police officers. Okay? John the Baptist was murdered by white government supremacists, and Jesus had to go mourn and process that, but then he got called to action. Mm-hmm. And so when we study the scriptures, if you're a person of faith in Christ Jesus, seek God how you should be involved. Mm-hmm. It's not for everybody to necessarily feel comfortable to get out in the streets and do this, but you should have the heart of the Good Samaritan. There should be some compassion for the downtrodden, and you should ask and pray and say, Lord, soften my heart and show me how I am to get involved in what your will is for social justice, for equality, and for the goodness of all God's creations.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Pastor Devin. Mr. Thomas Johnson.
Yes, hi. So what is on my heart is Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper and not to harm you, but to give you a hope and a future. When I think of the census, that's a hope and future, not just for me right now, but I hope that after COVID, 10 years, my oldest now 14, he'll be 24. What legacy am I leaving, right? And what hope and future do I want for my family as I do this work daily? We're out in the streets right now. We have our mask on. I'm washing my hands. I'm using hand sanitizer like crazy. I think I've used more lotion than I've ever used in my life. But it's one of these things because this is what I believe in. I believe in it because I know this is going to set up for a better future for my family and for the place where I live and love. So that's something I'm going to take with me, and that's why I do what I do.
Absolutely, man. Thank you so much for that. Ms. Joanne Antoine, what are your closing thoughts?
Yeah, I would just say, especially when we're thinking about voting, if you're unsure and you just don't feel like your voice really matters, remembering that your life, literally depends on it, right? The leaders that we are electing into office and so forth, they're the ones that are making decisions about COVID response, right? They're the ones who are going to take action on whether or not you're able to stay in your home and so forth. And, when we are, I think when I first started organizing, all of our outreach was really focused in the church, right? That's the first place you go, any community you go into. And it's because, the church, the people who are in the churches really are one of the strongest voting blocks that we have. And, there's a reason why, even when we're not looking at a state like Maryland, let's look at southern states. There's a reason why there are actors that are trying to do everything in their power, to disenfranchise voters, right? Anything from a poll tax, right, to literally you showing up and somehow your name vanishing from the roll. So I'd say, making sure that you understand that voting is a right, that there were people who literally put their lives, on the line in order for you to be able to have this right to vote right now, and that you're honoring them, but also thinking about yourself and your community members who have to navigate the pandemic and unfortunately just the state of the country moving forward. Yeah.
Absolutely. Excellent. Y'all, if I could put just any parting comments to this, it would be to remind us of a story that Jesus told in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 18. He tells a story about someone that he describes as an unjust judge and a widow who was seeking justice for her home and her community. The unjust judge first responded to her by rejecting her request, but her persistent voice made him decide that either he was going to respond favorably to this woman or she was going to wear him out. And I want you to know, as Jesus tells that story, that our voice is just as powerful. That even if we're facing unjust systems or unjust judges, our voice is a powerful voice that can change our community and change our world. Whether you're using that voice on the streets in protest, or online putting in your census, or in the voting booth, I would recommend that you do all three and more, understanding the power of your voice. Jesus understood that power and he told that story so that for many reasons. But for one reason, so that we would understand that we have the power to flip over unjust systems and to influence even the most unjust judges because of the power of each and every one of our voices. And so I challenge you, if you're with us here on this Power Breakfast, to make sure that you are using your voice. Go online, complete your census. Make sure that you get your ballot for the primary elections and vote early, and take every opportunity you can to get to the streets in a safe and COVID-friendly manner to make sure that our voices are heard in the streets, online, and in the ballot boxes. I want to say thank you to this wonderful panel once again for them sharing their time, for you all sharing your time with us together today at the Collective Empowerment Group. And once again, for every person who's viewing us on Facebook Live or however you're viewing this broadcast, we want to encourage you to connect with the Collective Empowerment Group. Go to our website, www.empowerdmv.org. If you are a business owner or a business professional, we want to encourage you to connect with us as a strategic partner so that we can bring our collective strength together. If you're a pastor or a church leader, get your church signed up as a member church of the Collective Empowerment Group. Take advantage of the benefits of being connected with a powerful organization that unites the banking community, the business community, and the faith community. Thank you once again for joining us for this Power Breakfast. We'll see you next time here at the Collective Empowerment Group.